From the moment I stepped into the marble-lined hallways of the Capitol that morning, I sensed the air was different, tense, almost electric. There was chatter everywhere about the upcoming committee hearing, but the real reason people had that edge in their voices was no secret. Representative Jasmine Crockett and Representative Nancy Mace were about to be in the same room, and it wasn't going to be pretty. The dispute had been simmering for weeks, quietly at first, tucked away in snide comments during interviews and thinly veiled social media posts. But after Mace accused Crockett of turning her back on American values in a fiery statement to the press, the gloves came off. Crockett, never one to back down, had fired back with a blistering remark about Mace's questionable alliances with corporate lobbyists, hinting at a web of influence she promised to expose. By the time the hearing began, the room was packed with reporters, aides, and political operatives who smelled blood in the water. Cameras were positioned at every angle, waiting for the first spark. I found my spot in the back, notebook ready, my instincts telling me this wasn't going to be a normal political spat. This was going to be a public brawl over patriotism, integrity, and the kind of country Americans wanted to live in. When Crockett walked in, her posture was sharp, her eyes locked forward. Moments later, Mace entered, wearing a faint, almost smug smile that felt rehearsed. The tension didn't just hang in the air, it crackled. And then, the gavel hit the desk, and the stage was set for the clash. The first 30 minutes of the hearing were a polite charade, procedural motions, rehearsed questions, the kind of political theater that barely holds the attention of seasoned journalists. But then, it happened. Nancy Mace leaned into her microphone, her tone suddenly sharp. "Representative Crockett," she began, "I have to ask, when you constantly undermine the very principles that built this nation, whose side are you really on?" The room went dead silent. No rustle of papers, no coughs, just the sound of cameras clicking like machine guns. Crockett didn't even flinch. She took a slow sip of water, placed the glass down, and stared directly at Mace. "The only thing I'm undermining, Congresswoman, is the false narrative you've been selling to the American people," she shot back. "Patriotism isn't about waving a flag when the cameras are on. It's about protecting the people who live under that flag, even when it's inconvenient for your donors." Mace's expression tightened, a flicker of irritation breaking through her polished composure. "That's rich coming from someone who—" she started, but Crockett cut her off. "Careful, Nancy. If you start talking about loyalty, we might have to talk about where your campaign checks come from. And I have receipts." The audience shifted in their seats, a ripple of gasps moving through the room. One of Mace's aides scribbled something frantically on a notepad. This wasn't just a policy disagreement anymore. Crockett had just turned it into a personal battle. Somewhere in the front row, a reporter whispered to a colleague, "This is going to blow up before lunch." The tension was now a living thing in the room, crackling in the air like static before a lightning strike. Nancy Mace tried to steer the conversation back to the prepared agenda, but Jasmine Crockett wasn't done. She leaned forward, her voice measured, but carrying enough weight to slice through the murmurs in the chamber. "You see, Congresswoman," Crockett said almost conversationally, "when you talk about patriotism, you like to wrap it in slogans and photo ops. But let's discuss actual actions. Let's talk about the offshore meetings you attended last summer, the ones that don't appear on your official schedule." Mace blinked, her posture stiffening. "That's a baseless accusation," she shot back, her tone rising. Crockett smiled faintly. "It's not an accusation when you have documents, Nancy. Flight records, meeting minutes, donations transferred within 48 hours of your return. I'm sure the American people would love to hear why a self-proclaimed defender of the nation's integrity was dining with foreign lobbyists whose interests directly oppose U.S. security." The chamber erupted into a mix of gasps, whispers, and camera flashes. Even a few members of Mace's own party turned their heads sharply toward her, their expressions unreadable. Mace's jaw tightened as she gripped the edge of the table. "This is character assassination," she said, but there was a tremor in her voice, the kind that told seasoned journalists in the room that a nerve had been hit. Crockett didn't let up. "No, Nancy, this is called transparency, and if we're going to talk about loyalty, we need to have the full picture, because patriotism without accountability isn't patriotism at all. It's theater." In the gallery, reporters began typing feverishly, knowing that whatever came next could make headlines nationwide by the evening news. Nancy Mace straightened in her chair, clearly realizing that staying on the defensive would only make her look weaker. She took a deep breath, her voice sharpening like a blade. "All right, Jasmine," she began, leaning slightly forward. "If we're going to talk about accountability, let's talk about you. Your campaign donors include corporate PACs tied to industries you claim to oppose. Oil and gas money, Jasmine. How does that square with your so-called progressive principles?" For a moment, the room seemed to still. Mace's eyes glinted, convinced she'd found her opening. A few members of her caucus even smirked, sensing a shift in momentum. But Crockett didn't flinch. In fact, her expression almost softened, the way a chess player looks when her opponent falls into a trap she set 5 moves ago. "I'm glad you brought that up," Crockett replied smoothly, "because unlike you, I disclose everything, fully and on time. Yes, I've received donations from a broad spectrum, and every single one of those dollars is documented. But here's the difference. I don't vote in favor of those corporations' interests in exchange for cash. I don't take a check on Monday and gut environmental protections on Tuesday." Her voice grew louder, rising over the murmurs. "You, however, seem to believe that campaign contributions are IOUs. The same oil companies that line your pockets just happen to benefit from the very bills you champion. Funny coincidence, isn't it?" Mace tried to interject, but Crockett cut her off with surgical precision. "So, Nancy, if you want to play the corruption card, make sure you're not holding the entire deck yourself." Reporters scribbled faster, and one could almost hear the push notifications pinging in newsrooms across the country. This was no longer just a congressional spat. It was a public reckoning, and Mace was slipping further into the undertow. Nancy Mace's jaw tightened. The measured smirk she had worn earlier was gone, replaced by something sharper, a mixture of irritation and wounded pride. "You know, Jasmine," she said, her tone dripping with controlled venom, "it's easy to throw stones when you've built your whole career on being a professional provocateur. You make noise, you get headlines, and you pretend that's leadership. But some of us actually try to get things done in Washington." Crockett tilted her head slightly, like a cat watching a mouse that had just stepped a little too far from its hole. "Get things done? That's an interesting phrase coming from someone whose greatest legislative achievement is naming a post office," she shot back, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge. A few in the room chuckled under their breath, but Crockett didn't pause. "And let's not rewrite history here. You love to tell the world how you're a rebel in your own party, the independent voice, the maverick. But every time the chips are down, Nancy, you fall right in line. You voted against certifying the election, you parroted Trump's talking points, and now you're trying to rebrand yourself as some centrist truth-teller. Which version of Nancy should we believe today?" Mace's cheeks flushed, but she leaned forward, refusing to back down. "At least I haven't made my career by vilifying everyone who disagrees with me. You don't build coalitions, Jasmine, you burn bridges." Crockett didn't even blink. "Sometimes, Nancy, the bridge leads somewhere rotten. And when it does, burning it isn't a loss. It's an act of public service." The room erupted into a mix of laughter, gasps, and rapid camera clicks. This wasn't just a policy fight anymore. It was a clash of identities, reputations, and survival instincts. and Jasmine Crockett, with her words landing like body blows, was winning the psychological war. By now, the air between them was electric, not the tense kind that holds back, but the volatile charge that signals something is about to explode. Cameras zoomed in, sensing the moment. Nancy Mace straightened her blazer, but her voice came out sharper than intended. You think you're some moral authority, Jasmine, but you're just another partisan warrior. You talk about truth, yet all you do is spin it to fit your narrative. You've mastered outrage, but outrage doesn't fix anything. Crockett let the words hang in the air for a moment, then leaned forward with a slow, deliberate smile. Nancy, the difference between you and me is simple. I don't pretend. I don't hide behind fake bipartisanship while selling out to whichever power broker can advance my career. You've been so busy playing both sides, you've forgotten what side you're really on. A murmur swept through the press gallery. Mace opened her mouth to respond, but Crockett pressed on, her voice growing firmer. You call it coalition building. I call it moral gymnastics. And the truth? Your act might have worked 5 years ago, but now people see right through it. They know when a politician's spine is made of rubber. Mace's eyes narrowed. And people are starting to realize when someone's ego is bigger than their cause, she shot back. Crockett's reply was instant. Better a big ego than small convictions. The audience let out a collective, ooh, and even the moderator looked like they were holding back a grin. This wasn't a debate anymore. It was a public reckoning, and every second was being recorded, replayed, and dissected for millions of future views. It was clear now, neither woman intended to de-escalate. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in with the intensity of the moment. The moderator barely got through the next question before Jasmine Crockett seized the floor. Her voice was calm, but carried the weight of every headline she knew would follow. You know what, Nancy? I'm done pretending we're just having a polite disagreement. This isn't about policy, it's about integrity. And yours has been on vacation for a very long time. Gasps rippled through the audience. Mace stiffened but didn't interrupt. Crockett leaned in slightly, eyes locked on hers. You posture as the rebel, the truth-teller. But every time it matters, every time real courage is required, you fold. You trade conviction for convenience, truth for television clips, and loyalty for leverage. You've turned politics into a brand, and you've sold that brand to the highest bidder. Mace opened her mouth, but Crockett raised a hand. Don't bother denying it. The people watching at home, they know, and history will too. The room erupted, some in applause, others in shocked laughter. Mace forced a tight smile, but it was the smile of someone who just realized the viral clip was already writing itself. As Crockett sat back, the cameras caught the exact frame, her composed expression, Mace blinking rapidly, and the caption editors would later add, she ended her career in 30 seconds. It wasn't just a mic drop. It was the kind of line that would play on repeat across social media, stitched into countless reaction videos, dissected on late-night shows, and quoted in op-eds. By the time the debate ended, it didn't matter what Nancy Mace had said in response. The narrative belonged to Jasmine Crockett, and it wasn't letting go.